You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is. Only got no ohs. It's like they just wanna see you struggle. I swear they don't wanna see you shine. They don't. It's like they just want you to bleed and they want you to fall. They don't want you to be where the streets are paved with gold.
Welcome to Mastermind, the home of Black excellence and self-mastery. Here's your host, Mr. G.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today on the journey towards self-mastery. Our next guest says he went from selling dope to selling hope. After facing life in prison on 3 felony drug charges and being sentenced to 10 years in prison, he was able to change his life and find his purpose. He was able to enroll in a PhD program at St. Louis University and graduated at the top of his class. He's an endocrinologist scientist that focuses on type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and metabolism. He's a program consultant for the National Institute of Health, a youth mentor, an entrepreneur, and an author. His book, From Prison Cells to PhD, It's Never Too Late to Do Good, documents his life leading up to his drug charge and how he used his second chance to turn his life around. He's also the founder and director of Prison to PhD, a nonprofit organization that focuses on helping the formerly incarcerated transform their lives through education by putting them on the pathway to higher education, thus creating true reformation. Let's welcome today Dr. Stanley Andrisse to the program. Dr. Andrisse, how you doing today, man?
Thank you. I'm doing great, feeling blessed. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely an honor to have you on the program. Love the book, man. I couldn't put it down once I, started actually listening to it. I like the fact that I like when authors kind of like read their own book, so
yeah,
it was a great experience, man, listening to the book.
I had to audition to read my own book. They were
Really?
going to have a professional book reader, and I had to audition to get several professional book readers. And I was a little concerned at first. I was like, man, I got to audition to read my own book, but apparently it all worked out. They chose me, and I agree. Like, it's such a personal book. It wouldn't have been the same with someone else's voice reading some of the passages within the book. So, and I also enjoy reading and hearing from the author. So yes, I was fortunate to be the one that actually read my book. So.
Absolutely, man. Agreed. Thank goodness you got through that, man. Yes, you was the best fit for your own job, man. So yeah, man. So a lot to talk about, man. I was really kind of, surprised by reading your book, like some of the things that you've been through, and to be able to just really transform your life into, what it is now. So definitely kudos for being able, to do that and to persevere through everything, man. But let's just start with your upbringing, man. You grew up in Ferguson. Are we talking about the same Ferguson that we saw after Mike Brown? Was that the same environment? So can you chat with us about that?
Yeah, of course. This is a couple of decades before Mike Brown in terms of the beginnings of my challenges and experiences in Ferguson. So definitely did not know all that we know about like the practices in terms of the excessive policing, the over policing, the policing tactics in that area. I knew nothing about that. What I did know is that I can remember being as young as 8 years old and running from the cops and just, in my neighborhood, just always seeing police presence, to the point of just believing that, well, the police are around here because, there must be a lot of criminals around here. Just, this must be an area of bad people, without even saying the exact words of saying, black people equal bad people. This is an area where a bunch of police are, so there must be bad people. And this particular area also happens to be 90% black. So, it just subconsciously a person puts together that the folks from this area must be, bad people, or at least, need to be policed. I had no idea of what over policing, excessive policing was. I just knew that there was a lot of police around. So you got that percolating in your mind as a young kid, and, what that is doing to your subconscious to subconsciously feel that the world sees you and your community as criminals. when the police came around, they weren't seen as coming around to help. We were running from the police. We didn't even have to be running. We didn't have like, you know, when I was 8 years old, I wasn't doing anything illegal, but I just had this like knowledge that in this neighborhood, we run from the cops because the cops don't come to help us. They usually are coming to bring some type of harm or trouble your way. So things like that percolating in my mind as a very young kid, growing up into thinking about like my time in school in junior high and high school. I can remember getting into a lot of like conduct issues to the point where, my teachers thought that I was this troublemaker and like bad kid. So even in school, I had police in the community really sending the message to me and the folks in the neighborhood that there's bad people here, there's criminals here. I had the authorities, my teachers, and people in school telling me, you're a troublemaker, you're a bad person. I'm in and out of detention and suspension. So all that culminated to eventually at 14 years old, I was arrested for the first time and moved into the juvenile system. But in actuality, I was seeing myself and being seen as a criminal even before officially getting the criminal stamp, being arrested and convicted at 14.
Yeah, that is really interesting, man. Just breaking down that psychology of being in that area. So do you think that psychology made it easier for you to be like okay with selling drugs? I know you started at a really
Yeah,
young
yeah. I
age.
mean, so that's exactly. I mean, so it made it seem as if it was the fitting thing to do. It made it seem like it was what was available to someone in that community. There wasn't like a nurturing of like, this is the community that doctors come out of. What it was more of like our area in St. Louis, the school district was Hazelwood East, where I was at. And that particular school district produced one of the highest number of NFL players in the St. Louis area. And it's actually one of the highest producers of professional folks in football in Missouri and in the Midwest. So you either made it as to the pros or you were hustling. That's what was kind of the things that you did from this particular neighborhood. So
And you was
yeah, I
trying
mean
to do both.
I was doing I was excelling in both.
Right, right, right.
So
Did you have any dudes in the community that was like, nah, young blood, this ain't it? Like, did you have anybody schooling you like, yo, this ain't really the route? Or was it more so, did you feel like more I guess the
yeah,
mentors and the older people on the block and around your neighborhood, were they just doing the same thing? Or was there anybody that's like, nah, you shouldn't really go that route? Was anybody talking in your ear?
so I mean I had a little bit of that, but I talk about it in the book where a family member of mine got very heavily involved in gangs and was a blood member and had some very violent interactions with being in gangs. And this was a particular family member that I very much looked up to and was like close to. So it wasn't as if everybody that I knew was selling drugs. So there certainly was some folks that were not doing those things.
Right.
But the more prevalent like way of living, behaving was to be involved in, those activities. And the ones that weren't usually were involved in sports. Like it wasn't as if they were necessarily saying anything bad about telling people to stop. They were just like not doing it themselves and like, I'm going
Hmm.
to take this path.
Right, right.
So yeah,
Got you. So the interesting thing too is that you started doing both, like with the selling, drugs, and then playing football and track and everything, and you transitioned that into college as well, man. So you were
yeah.
the man, in college as well, doing all that, I guess, until things got hot. So walk us through kind of your mind state in college, because I
Right.
was when I'm reading your book, I'm like, how did you balance that mind state of, yo, I'm gonna go to class and do what I got to do and be on the football team. You were there for a bit, and then also, I mean, I'm gonna push this weight. You know what I mean? Like, what was your
Yeah.
mind state at?
Yeah. Interestingly, it was similar to what I do now. Like I'm juggling a million things right now. And the way that I successfully operate as an academic professor, scientist, endocrinologist, as well as being a nonprofit leader and thought leader in the field of the criminal legal system, is delegation. So, like, I have an amazing research team that really runs my research program academically. Then I have an amazing nonprofit team of 30 plus individuals that run the nonprofit. Essentially, what I did and what I did then was what I'm doing now is I got the money. Like I'm just the person that gets the money and like say like, let's try these things. And then I give folks money to do it. So essentially, I've actually the things that I'm doing now as a professor and nonprofit leader, I was doing as a 16-year-old. I was getting a bunch of money and employing people and having them do the work,
Right.
and giving them guidance, and being in school at the same time. Like so I was able to delegate some of the things.
It's
Yeah,
interesting that you say that too, because I know that's part of what you do now, like, going into prisons and showing them how to take the criminal skills and then transforming them into professional skills, which is pretty much, what you
right,
did and what you mentioned you did. So it's
right.
something that you actually teach about as well, man, which is,
Yeah,
it's insane to think about, like, you being able to be successful in so many different things at once, but it's been like that your entire life, man. But we all know, like, we watch these movies with these drug leaders and, people selling drugs, and it's never really a happy ending like that. So you kind of
yeah,
had your day when you got caught by police. And can you walk us through that, like that day when kind of everything came to
yeah.
an
I was actually, eventually I was sitting in a courtroom facing 20 years to life in prison, as you mentioned, having amassed 3 felony convictions, and one of which being Class A drug trafficking, which is the highest class of felony. It's a similar class of felony as most violent crimes, such as murder and robbery. So this level of drug dealing, the courts and the system see it equivalent to those types of crimes, because essentially they say you can't be making this type of money and not be harming people. So, it's as if you're committing violent crimes, right? And so before I even got to that place of sitting in that courtroom looking at 20 years to life and 3 felony convictions, and I had been like seeing that I need to get out of this. Like I had gone from in high school, like being very savvy financially, and from the time in high school, it was always, coming from the Ferguson area, uh, my I come from a 2 parent household, and whereas pretty much everyone that I hung out with, pretty much didn't, particularly the folks that I considered what I call in the book my Fab Five. They were, the whole neighborhood is like not doing the greatest financially, economically, and we saw our hustling as a way to like put ourselves in a better economical, financial place, right? So that was kind of like the first people I started hustling with. And it was all about like doing it to try and get ourselves in a better economical, financial place for our family. And then I transitioned into like this very like dangerous territory of people selling drugs, that where everyone was carrying around guns, and the smallest amount of transaction was tens of thousands of dollars, where it's this that's the stakes are just much higher. So I had moved to this place where I was trying to get out for some time, because I really like got to like, I was just thinking to myself, like, how did I get here? Like from the time of like hustling and moving, a good amount of weight in high school, to doing this interstate stuff that I was doing, I was just kind of baffled at how I had gotten there so quickly. And I was trying to get out and I was just stuck because like the folks that I was hustling with, essentially wouldn't let me get out. And so I felt very much like trapped, and there was some threats sent my way. And so I felt like I couldn't get out. And then I got popped. I got caught up in a drug task force raid that came down on several different individuals, a full-on SWAT team, assault rifles aimed at me, and very easily it was as if they were coming to get like a cartel drug lord. I mean,
And what are you, like 20, 21, like at this
yeah,
point?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, literally just that feeling, you get people, you get that, jokingly, like people say they could have like wet themselves, or like, I literally like everything just I mean, it's just unexplainable to the feeling of fear and just like terror when you have like it happened in this like instant where all of a sudden all of these guns are pointed at you, and I was almost certain that they had come to kill me. They were there to strike like complete utter terror and fear into me, and they did a very, very good job of it. So, I get caught up in that situation, and several other people get caught in this raid. Eventually, when it's all said and done, there was five of us that got charged eventually, charged and convicted. But only three of us ended up going to prison, and two individuals did not. The three that went to prison were myself and two other black individuals, and there were white two white guys that
Yeah.
got caught up with this, never stepped foot in prison. They got a
Wow.
conviction, but then it got overturned through a certain type of mitigated thing called drug court.
That's wild, man. I mean, it's pretty normal, but it's still wild, that
Yeah.
occurred, man. That's wow. So walk us through, you know what I mean, the day of your sentencing, man. Like you facing life, man. Like as a 21-year-old just graduated from college, man, which should be the happiest moment in your life. You know what I'm saying? You're sitting in a courtroom facing life in prison. So what was that experience like?
I went into the courtroom, really kind of unsure what was going to happen. My lawyer would frequently tell me, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And, I was like, it's so easy for you to tell me this stuff to, hope for the best and, plan for a life in prison. How do you plan for that? You know what I mean? Like you plan for that. Like what you telling me to plan for life in prison? I like so you can't do that, you know what I mean? And yet that's how he asked me to approach the situation is hope that you don't go to prison, but plan for going to prison for life. Like
Man,
prepare yourself for that.
that's a
Uh,
mental train wreck right there.
it's almost impossible to do. And
Yeah.
many, I now work with a lot of people through my nonprofit organization where we help currently and formerly incarcerated people, and just countless people will recount it is that moment of uncertainty during sentencing and early in your sentence. That's one of the most like psychologically, emotionally difficult because you just don't know what's about to happen to you. But yeah, so I didn't know what was going to happen. And I'm sitting in the courtroom and I'm, just hearing all this stuff being mentioned about me from the prosecutor in terms of she's got to make her case to try to convince the judge to sentence me to life in prison. She was successful in getting the judge to convict me as a prior and persistent career criminal. That's what allowed her to even push for life. I was looking at 5 to 15 years originally. She hit me with the three strikes law, Missouri's three strikes law, and that changed my time from 10 to life. And she was pushing for the highest amount. And so she had to make a case for that. So she's talking just like she painted the picture of me being this dangerous threat to society that was hopeless, that, what's better than, one of the things that she mentioned, what's better than a criminal, or what's worse than a criminal, an educated criminal in her
Wow.
opinion. So like my schooling was not actually good to her. She flipped that around and made that actually bad, because, this is a smarter criminal now. So, I mean, it was just this back and forth. And by the end of it, when, the judge eventually came down with her ruling and she sentenced me to 10 years in prison, it was kind of this, out of body experience, that one of the first things that I asked the judge when I finally, like, it hit me was, if I could go hug my mother. And, at this point, my mom was in the, back in the courtroom, bawling in tears. I'm the, youngest of five. We are, Haitian immigrants. So my mom, when they came over, we were all we had. Like, she really didn't, we were in a neighborhood that was primarily Black, but my first language I learned was Creole, and my parents really only spoke Creole. They, spoke very heavy accent, and
Right.
English
Yeah.
was not the
Mine too.
strongest. So they didn't really build neighborhood friends. Like, we were all they had. And so now her youngest son is going away. She was just like devastated. And as was I. Like, I knew that we were kind of all we had, and I was leaving, and all I wanted to do was just, hug her before going off to start the sentence. And, the judge denied me that opportunity to, go give my mother a hug. And
Wow. That's,
it's,
did they have a
it's,
reason for that, or just like, nah, you can't go? Like,
I mean, no explanation. No,
wow.
they just, came and handcuffed my hands and, of, feet, and, or, shackled my feet and took me off. But what I came to know is that it was kind of this first moment. I had been in and out of courtrooms for some time now, with having the third felony conviction, and, being incarcerated previously. And, but for some reason, I still had this, like, belief that the criminal justice system actually had justice in it and actually cared about people. But it was at that moment that I realized that once you are on this other side, you are no longer considered a person. You're no longer given the civility and respect of being a human being. You are just, this second class scum of the earth, and, we don't care about you. Like, why do you think that we're going to allow you to hug your mother? You're a criminal. No one cares about you. Society doesn't need you. We don't want you. And, this was just reiterated to you. It kind of hit me, like, hit me right in the face at that moment. But then pretty much every other day of incarceration, every minute, every hour, there's something that reminds you that you ain't shit. Like, every day you're just getting reminded of that, from the very beginning of the day, and multiple moments throughout the day. The guards, the incarcerated people, the situation, how you have to dress, how you have to eat, how you have to sleep, how you have to, your identity is just a number. Like, everything is telling you that you ain't nothing.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
they call that prison reform, right? You know?
right. I mean, that's how they think that, let's treat you like subhuman. And then, the thing about it is 95% of people in prison are coming home eventually. So, why treat you like crap? And, how do we think, as a society, why would we want to treat people like that and then have them come back into our streets? What are we,
Mm,
and not having given them anything except for just caging them up and not giving
exactly.
them any type of programming? What do we think is going to come
Exactly.
out?
I think it's
If
known what's gonna come out, man. But this is what feeds the system, man. You know what I'm saying? They
exactly,
need bodies in the jails. They need people in there.
exactly,
So might as well have, us in there. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
that's what
So
I
it,
see it
it
as.
becomes this perpetual revolving door. So they know that they put you in, and that's why the prosecutor in her prophecy, she prophesied that I needed to be thrown away because I was going to be in this revolving door. Let's just throw him away now. Like, save the court time to, like, he's just going to keep coming in and out. Like, we've seen, this is his third time here. He's not learned. And so the system knows that once you get thrown in, like, you're there for life, whether you got a 2-year sentence, 5-year sentence, 10-year sentence, life sentence. The way the system is set up, it's set up for you to go back. We know that, about 60 to 70%, basically 3 out of 4 people that step out of prison will eventually step back into prison within 1 to 3 years of release. So we know that basically we're sentencing individuals to life because we're not giving them anything to better themselves. So a lot of people just cycle in and out, in and out, in and out for
And
decades.
I could definitely see like Ava DuVernay's point with the prison system being a slave system, kind of based off everything that you just mentioned, man. So it's like, with slavery, not even once you free the slave, you don't give them any type of resource or information or anything and just tell them just to go and be like, you know what I'm saying? And then they come right back, they come right back. So it's really interesting, kind of like the correlations between those two. But when you were, in prison, a lot of what you mentioned created kind of this depression within you that led to like suicidal ideation and a lot of stuff that you were experiencing, in prison. How did you find your way out of that? Like, how did you get back to regular ground while you were in prison and get away from that mindset and your mental state?
Yeah, I think that is one of the more challenging things, and that was early on in my incarceration. I believed, I didn't necessarily like this prosecutor and the things that she had just said about me being this dangerous threat to society, but I very much believed him. I went into prison feeling that I was this terrible person that deserved and needed to be in prison for a very long time. And it was hard to break that. And through what we believe in the organization and through my experience, what I learned was, for me, I was fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life that saw a different trajectory. He saw me using my talents in a different way. He saw this potential and he started investing in it, both his money and time. That tied with, I eventually ended up losing my dad to his battle with type 2 diabetes. And this was over the course, maybe about 2 years. He was in and out of surgeries and had multiple amputations and multiple hospitalizations. And in that process, I felt like this deep sense of guilt because, I explained this a little bit more in depth in the book, but I basically had parted ways from my dad in particular because I was hustling and he would have these conversations with me around trying to help me see a different way. And and I kind of went away from him, and we had kind of not connected for some time before I went away. And then he was relatively healthy from what I had remembered, and then all of a sudden his health goes down. I felt that was somehow attached to me going away. So there's this sense of guilt that I had, even remove the guilt part, just dealing with sickness, death, and dying is challenging for, anybody to process, and losing somebody on the outside. We have the ability, most folks do, to go through the stages of grief, one of them being anger and being upset with just life and just being mad and yelling and screaming and maybe punching a pillow or, but you can't just start yelling, screaming, and punching in prison. That will literally lead to a very dangerous situation for you to start.
Right, you become a target. Yeah.
Right. So, you can't really do that in prison. And one of the other stages of grief is, depression, sadness, crying. You can't really do that in prison. Crying is seen as weakness and, again, could bring harm your way. So if you think about the stages of grief, you can't do that in prison. One of the things that I personally saw and believe is that a lot of the violence in prison is manifested because people have no way to deal with the grief and trauma that that they've encountered through their life. And so people are matriculating that into like, I'm about to fight you because like, all this stuff is built up inside of me. The only way that I could release this is this way. But for me, instead of doing that, I bottled this up and I used this like frustration, emotional distress, and psychological difficulties, and I poured it into learning about diabetes. So, I read my first scientific article on diabetes while I was locked in a cage, and medical articles are very difficult to read through, like every other word, something you've never heard of. So that for most people is like, I'm gonna go ahead and not pick that up. It's too hard. But for
Right.
me, what it did, I picked it up and I was okay with spending weeks, even months going through just one article. It allowed me to, although my body was physically locked in this prison cell, my mind was freely roaming around in the human cell. And in that way, I actually kind of freed myself. That's also where I kind of fell in love with what I do now. At that time, there was no idea of trying to get into like any programs or do anything with it. It was just this thing that helped free me and see myself differently. But eventually, this mentor really started convincing me that I needed to continue my education. And when it was coming time for me to be released, I ended up taking months to put together a number of applications to continue my education. I mean, literally things like getting an application packet in the mail would often get rejected because you could only have 5 pieces of paper in the mail. So an application generally has a packet that has like 30 pages. So everything kept getting rejected.
Yeah. I
Things,
remember in a previous interview, you mentioned that although you can
yeah,
get that, like the packaging in the mail, you can order, cans of food, like at,
yeah,
pounds bulk. Like, what I'm saying? You can order all these other things that are, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Cigarettes in bulk, and then actual educational material,
right.
books, paperwork is like you get minimum.
Illegal.
It's, yeah.
It's so the way I always, you could get some like 20 cans of tobacco, 10 boxes of little Debbie's. So, I would say you're allowed to get lung cancer and diabetes, but heaven forbid you try to get educated. That's
Mm,
illegal. That's actually illegal to try to get educated. Like I was getting tickets and violations for trying to get into school. Like I was literally harming my
wow.
release date by trying to get applications because when I was getting all this mail, they were actually violating me for having too much mail and too much educational material.
Wow. That's just so
Um,
it's not wild, but it's just like
it's
it's just
backwards.
blatant. It's blatant like
Yeah.
what's happening. So wow. But you
Um,
persevered, man. You persevered. So luckily you
yeah.
had people by your side assisting in the process, man.
I mean, I was rejected from every place I applied to except for that place where that mentor was on the admissions committee. So I got into St. Louis University, and as you mentioned at the top of the call, I completed my PhD and MBA at the top of my class in much shorter time than my peers, and then eventually ended up moving on to Johns Hopkins and eventually Howard University. And I'm also a visiting professor at Georgetown University and took the hustle across seas, and I'm at Imperial College London, a visiting researchership at Imperial College London. So yeah, it's a long way from the cell block. That I've come a long way from the cell block.
Yes, sir. And that's just it's an amazing story, but it's also amazing too that having that mentor. And it's like it's almost like you have two different sides here with the mentor and then the prosecutor that was
Right, right,
against you.
right,
Where that person was trying to end your life and the other person was trying to give you life. You know what I'm saying? So
right, right.
I'm glad, your mentor was able to persevere through everything and, provide that for you. And I just imagine if we all had that type of mentor, all these guys that's locked up, if they had somebody like that. And it's kind of like what you're creating within the P2P
P2P program, yeah,
program, and you're trying to provide that now. So can you talk to us
yeah,
about that program and what it is that you're trying to do for
yeah.
people that are locked up?
Yeah. So the organization is From Prison Cells to PhD, which is the same as the title of the book. And the program is called Prison to Professionals, or P2P, the P2P Scholars Program. And we have about 400 applications per year, currently and formerly incarcerated men and women. And we have about 100 people that go through the Scholars Program per year. And we're successfully able to get about 90 to 95% of those individuals into schools and meaningful employment. And meaningful employment to us is that, a lot of folks in programs are looking for gainful employment, like I need a paycheck at the very bare minimum, but we don't want to get people minimum wage. We want to get people into careers, and we want to get people into things that they see as meaningful, that brings purpose and value to their life and to others' lives. And that's what we mean by meaningful employment. We're helping people get things that bring purpose into their life. Um, and, the subtitle of the book, It's Never Too Late to Do Good. And this is actually a phrase that, my father used to tell me. And of course, as I mentioned, we spoke Creole in the house. So the phrase was, Il n'est jamais trop tard pour faire bien. The exact translation is, it is never too late to do good. The more accurate translation of what he was meaning is, it's never too late to reach your full potential, and it's never too late to do the right thing. So for him, we would have these conversations because they eventually found out like how deep I was into selling drugs. And for him, it was this like deep understanding that he believed in me, and he believed that I had the ability to change and, do good and, bring good and value to myself and into the world. But he wanted to instill in me, for me to believe in myself. And I wasn't quite at the, I eventually ended up losing him before I had the opportunity to even let him know that I started to understand, what he was meaning. So the phrase is obviously very powerful and meaningful to me and what he meant to me. The book is dedicated to him. My PhD was dedicated to him. But that phrase and meaning is actually very powerful to the criminal legal system, because the problem with the system is we don't believe in people. We don't believe in people's ability to change. We don't truly believe in second chances. That's why we give out 10, 20, 30, 40 double life. Why do I need a double life sentence? Like, why is that even a thing that we do? Like, I'm going to die and come back. And when I come back to life, you're going to sentence me to life again? Like, dang,
Yeah.
like,
Wow, that's wild.
wow, why? Like, why do we do that? But we do it constantly. And so we over sentence individuals because as a society, we don't believe in the ability to change. And what his message was is that I believe in you. I believe that right now you don't see it in you, but I know that with time you will eventually see it in yourself. And I know that you will see this change. And I truly believe, as he did, that everyone has that capacity if we're
Agreed.
giving them the, nurturing and access and opportunities to allow them to rehabilitate and matriculate into that change. But as of right now, we don't see it that way as a society or a system. And so we just over incarcerate.
Agreed, man. And I think the work that you're doing is definitely going against that. And just the numbers that you gave us, man. Like the minute that somebody who comes back, who comes home, steps foot in an educational institution, it's almost like impossible for them to go back. You know what I'm saying? Just stepping
Right.
into that institution in that educational space is just going to be changing the trajectory of their lives. So definitely
Yeah.
appreciate the work that you're doing, man. And
Yeah. Yeah.
as we leave off, man, what is the legacy that you want to create with all of this, man? Like what do you want people to understand and know about the work that you're doing with P2P as an educator, and then of course as a Black scientist?
Yeah. So those are some of the identities that I hold most dearly. is, firstly being a father. So I have a 4-month-old son
Yes, sir.
who was named after my dad, William. I have a, 3-year-old daughter. So, I hope that I can just be the father to them and that be part of my legacy. And, being the husband to my wife that she and my family needs me to be. But then, my identity as a mentor and professor at a HBCU such as Howard, and being a nonprofit leader that basically is a mentor to hundreds of formerly incarcerated individuals. The legacy that I would like to leave in that regard is, helping to reverse this school to prison pipeline. Right now, we've been building the school to prison pipeline for decades. We've been throwing Black bodies into cages and keeping them in the cycle for decades. And the work that I'm doing with MP2P within the book that I hope that I continue to do and leave a legacy is to reverse that. We are in the process and we've gotten a good amount of funding to create a prison to STEM and college pipeline, where we are reversing things and we're helping people move, providing programming inside prison and helping folks transfer into college campuses. And as you said, just stepping foot on these campuses drastically reduces the possibility, from like 60 to 70% to down into the teens just to get a bachelor's degree or associate's degree and a master's or higher. And it essentially eliminates that possibility. So we're creating this pathway. And I hope that pathway, after it operates for decades, our prison population, can go from in the 2 millions to next to nothing is the hope.
Agreed, man. That is amazing work that you're doing, man. And I could definitely see those things being, that change that we need within the system to actually create, reform, actual reform. And that's what you're doing. So I appreciate that. Appreciate the work that you're doing. We usually ask guests to leave us with their favorite quote and what it means to them. I think I already know your favorite quote, but if you had anything else to leave us with, you can as well.
Yeah, I would say, as the title of the book, it's never too late to be good would be the quote from my father.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Creole translation as well. So I think that is a super important message to any listeners out there, anyone that has struggled early on in life. If Dr. Andrisse's story is not, telling you that it's never too late, I don't know what's going to tell you, man. You're talking about, him being a major pusher, to him pushing, education, pushing prison reform, pushing science. It is just a powerful story. So I think that we should all believe that it is never too late to do good, no matter where we're at in life right now. So definitely pick up the book. You can check it out on Amazon. And, if you have kids that are in that trajectory, get them the book. I think one of the things I like about the book is that it's in a language that kids that are experiencing this stuff at the moment can really pick up and understand. And I appreciate, you writing that. So definitely check out the book. Let's support. Hopefully we'll have him back on the program for part 2 so we can discuss diabetes and some science and some medical research and part of that work that he does. And in the meantime, remember, your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. Therefore, if you can think it, you can do it. If you believe in it, you can be it. And if you fight for it, you can have it. The world is yours. This has been your host, Mr. G, and I will see you next time on Mastermind.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one starved illegal or you had a job. And when they doubted me, brought the best out of me. The women wanna holler, the fellas wanna shout at me. Voices in my head, I swear they getting kinda loud at me. And how I turn this thing into gold, see this is alchemy. They never know.